Greetings to Dr. Wong. We are from Group 10 and we will be presenting our group assignment, which is from Chapter 12, Portfolio Opportunities and Choice. So for the first question, which is question 4, determine the correlation between price movements of stock A and B using the forecast of their rate of return and the assessment of the possible states of the world in the following table. Before doing the calculation, form an expectation of whether that correlation will be closer to 1 or -1 by merely inspecting the numbers. So my answer is the state of the economy for moderate recession and slight recession. Both stock A and stock B shows a negative value, where stock A is -0.02 and -0.01. Stock B -0.20 and -0.10, while for 2% and 3% growth shows a positive value where stock A is 0.15 for both growth and stock B is 0.15 and 0.13. Even though they are negative value for moderate recession and slight recession, we can see that the movement pattern for both stock value is rising. That indicates positive relationship. This positive relationship shows that correlation is moved closer to 1. So to prove it, using the calculation, first we need to find the expected return for both stock. Using the formula probability times stock rate of return. So for stock A, the result is 0.1175 and stock B is 0.125. Next is to find variance and standard deviation. Using formula probability times in bracket stock return minus expected return. For stock A, the result is 0.00423 and the standard deviation is square root of the result, which is 0.0650. And for stock B, the answer is 0.01937 and the standard deviation is square root of the result, which is 0.1392. Next is to find covariance using the formula probability times in bracket stock return minus expected return close bracket times stock return minus expected return for stock B. And the result is 0.008165. And finally, find correlation using the formula covariance for stock A and B divided by standard deviation for stock A and stock B. And the result is 0.902. As the expectation said earlier, the correlation value is 0.902 indicates that correlation is closer to 1.
Morning, my name is MOHAMMAD and I will be presenting the answer to question 6. Question 6. If the risk-reward trade-off line for a riskless asset and a risky asset result in a negative slope, what does that imply about the risky asset vis-a-vis the riskless asset? The answer is a negatively sloped risk-reward trade-off line drawn from a risk-free security to a risky security means that the expected return on the risky security is lower than on the risk-free security. In other words, an investor who decides to invest in the risky asset is bearing extra risk without expecting to be rewarded by a higher expected return. This situation is contrary to the typical expectation in finance, where taking on more risk is rewarded with higher potential returns. An option for a risky asset with a negative slope means it is offering less return compared to the risk-free asset, hence should not be invested in. This suggests that by moving from riskless asset to the risky asset, the investor is carrying an additional unit of risk, but the expected returns are actually falling. This might occur as a result of poor performance by the risk asset, adverse market conditions, or inefficiencies in the risk-reward relationship. Investors will decline the risk asset under these circumstances, as it affords no extra incentive to warrant the extra danger. That's all from me. Thank you.
Next is question 15, which is what is the minimum risk standard deviation portfolio of AT and Microsoft if the correlation between the two stocks is 0, 0.51 and -1. What do you notice about the change in the allocation between AT&T and Microsoft as the correlation coefficient move from -1 to 0 to 0.5 and to 1? Why might this be? What is the standard deviation of each of these minimum risk portfolio? So to answer this question, first we have to state the information given in the question, which is expected return for AT&T 0.10, expected return for Microsoft is 0.21, and standard deviation for AT&T 0.15 and standard deviation for Microsoft 0.25. Also, the correlation moved from -1 to 0 to -5 and 1. Then we can start the calculation using the formula. So my answer is for correlation -1, the final answer standard deviation portfolio is 0, and portfolio is minimum risk because standard deviation portfolio is close to 0. The portfolio achieve maximum diversification because of perfect negative correlation. We can see AT&T has a higher allocation, 62.5%, than Microsoft is 37.5%. The second correlation is 0. Then the calculation shown that standard deviation is 0.1 to 9, means here the correlation is neutral correlation. So portfolio risk increase slightly but remain low. This is because AT&T allocation increased to 73.5%, indicating this stock is more stable. Next is correlation 0.5. The standard deviation portfolio is 0.149, means here positive correlation. So portfolio risk is increased to almost 15%. This is because AT&T dominates the portfolio with an allocation of nearly 92.1%. So last correlation is 1. So the calculation shown that standard deviation portfolio is 0, means here no diversification, perfect positive correlation. So portfolio risk become linear because AT&T allocation value is very high, that is 250%, indicating imbalance and use of leverage. So that's all the answer for this question.
So for my part is I will present question number 16. So the question is, what is the optimal combination of these two securities in a portfolio for each of the four given values of the correlation coefficient, assuming the existence of a money market fund that currently pay a risk 0.045. Do you notice any relation between this weight and the weight for the minimum variance portfolio? What is the standard deviation of each of the optimal portfolios, and what is the expected return of each of the optimal portfolios? So the expected return of the portfolio formula is given ERP equals to WA times with E and times with RA plus WM times with E and times with RM, where WM minus 1 A equals to 1 minus WA. So for the portfolio standard deviation formula is given at the slide. So for P value, the weight is for 80 is 0.625, for Microsoft is 0.375. So the expected return answer is 0.14125 and the standard deviation is 0.09375. So for the zero value is for the weight for 80 is 0.735 and Microsoft is 0.265. The answer for expected return is 0.12915. So standard deviation answer for P0 is 0.109. So for P0.5, the weight for 80 is 0.921 and for Microsoft is 0.079. So the expected return answer is 0.10869 and the standard deviation is 0.121. So lastly for P1 is the weight for 80 is 2.5 and for Microsoft is negative 1.5. So the answer for expected return is negative 0.065 and the standard deviation is 0.15. So meanings that related to minimum variance portfolio, the weight in the optimal portfolio differ because they are adjusted to maximize the Sharpe ratio, which is risk return trade-off, factoring in the risk-free rate, and high correlation will reduce the diversification and shift the weight towards the lower risk asset. So thank you.
So I will present the question 11. The question 11 is derive the risk-reward trade-off line for the optimal portfolio when the correlation is 0.5. How much extra expected return can you anticipate if you take on an extra unit of risk? So the answer is have a 3-step, which is first, the value is already where P is 0.5, E in bracket RP 0.10869, the standard deviation P is 0.121 and RF is 0.045. Second is to the calculation based on formula given, which is E in bracket RP minus RF divided standard deviation P. We include the value into like the formula and we get the final value. Next is we have CML equation, which is show as E equal 0.045 plus 0.526. Then we interpret the equation, which is the slope of the CML is 0.526, meaning for every additional unit of risk, the portfolio offers an additional 0.526 units of expected return above the risk-free rate. So the final observation is extra return per unit of risk is 0.526 and the CML equation is E equal 0.045 plus 0.526. That's all from me. Thank you.
For the last question, which is question 22, what strategy is implied by moving further out to the right on a risk-reward trade-off line beyond the tangency point between the line and the risk-asset risk-reward curve? So the answer for that question is the strategy implied is to increase leveraging. When the corner point of the risk-reward trade-off line, which is CML, the investor will hold a portfolio with an optimal risk combined with a risk-free asset. Moving further to the right beyond this point means borrowing fund at the risk-free rate to invest more in the optimal risky portfolio, increasing both the portfolio risk and the expected return. So this strategy is optimal for investors with a high risk appetite who aim to maximize return regardless of potential loss or volatility. So the next question is what type of an investor would be most likely to embark on this strategy and why? Answer is there is no single portfolio selection strategy that is best for all people, but stage in the life cycle is an important determinant of the composition of a person's optimal portfolio and asset and liability. So based on the question above, The type of investor that's suitable is someone who is likely to seek high potential return by willing to take on high additional risk. Such investors typically have a high tolerance for risk and volatility. Therefore, by investing in a market portfolio and adjusting the proportion of risk-free asset, the investor can expect a combination of risk-reward over the CML. Lastly, in making portfolio selection decision, people can in general achieve a higher expected return only by exposing themselves to greater risk. So that's all from our presentation. Thank you.